evening and a very warm welcome. I'm Sana Khan and you're watching Gravitas, where we track the big news of the day and deconstruct them for you, bringing you perspectives on the issue. On tonight's show, President Trump is up and away as promised during his campaign. He pulled out of the TPP free trade deal. In Pakistan, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif could be in trouble as the country's Supreme Court might summon him in the Panama case. But first, the big news coming from the United States. Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump's pick for the post of the CIA director, gets a confirmation from the Senate. What does this mean for the United States, Trump presidency, and also the rest of the world? To discuss this story, we're joined in by Mr. V. Balachandran, former Special Secretary at the Cabinet Secretariat from Mumbai. In fact, he retired as RAW Special Secretary in 1994. Thanks, sir, so much for joining me. Also joining me on the show, Mr. Glenn Carl. He joins us from Boston. He is a writer and a former CIA officer. He served 23 years in the clandestine services on Monday night. Trump's love-hate relationship with the CIA is in focus now. Not much love is lost between Trump and CIA, but will the new man at the top change things around? Here's a report.
The run-up to his inauguration, Trump did not hide his contempt for the CIA. He had a dim view of the intelligence agencies and claimed they were making the US look like Nazi Germany. This was in the aftermath of reports that the Russians had compromising information about him. However, after he assumed office, Trump has taken a conciliatory line towards the CIA.
The office of President of the United States.
I love you. I respect you. There's nobody I respect more. You're going to do a fantastic job, and we're going to start winning again, and you're going to be leading the charge. So thank you all very much. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you.
With his nominee Michael Pompeo now at the helm of affairs, things might change for the better. Or will they? Human Rights Watch has already red-flagged Pompeo's appointment, citing overriding concerns, saying, open quote, Pompeo's response to questions about torture and mass surveillance are dangerously ambiguous about whether he would endorse abusive practices and seek to subvert existing legal protections. Close quote. Though the CIA is supposedly non-partisan and is above politics, Pompeo could be seen closely working with the president. He is known to be a sharp critic of Hillary Clinton for her actions in Libya. The question is whether Trump will begin to trust the organization more. Bureau Report, WION.
Let me first go across to WION's Giles Gibson. Giles, many are talking about the fact that it seems astonishing to watch the current confrontation between the US intelligence agencies and the president. He has in fact managed to equate the intelligence community with Nazi Germany recently. What's the sense that you're gathering on the ground there?
Well, Sana used the word confrontation there. I think Donald Trump and his administration would really disagree with that word. Since his inauguration, one of the first few things that he did actually was to go down to CIA headquarters and make that speech in front of around 400 CIA personnel, talking about how much he loved them and how much he respects them for their service to the country. And really what his team have tried to do is to paint this idea of a split between the Trump administration and the US intelligence community as something that's basically been created by overhyped by the US media. I think the US media would counter that, though, and they would say that throughout the campaign and throughout his time as president-elect, Donald Trump made several very clear statements on Twitter and also in person, casting doubt on the competency of some of the reports that he was getting and on the intelligence community as a whole here in terms of issues like, for example, the Russian hacking allegations. So certainly the attempt by the Trump administration has been to try to paint this split as really nothing more than a creation of the mainstream media.
All right, Giles, do stay with me. In fact, let me quickly go across to Mr. Balachandran now. Thanks for joining us. What, according to you, how will Trump's inherent lack of belief in the CIA pan out? There was confrontation, but then there was course correction right after his, oath-taking.
I think anybody who approaches the intelligence services with a prejudice initially is going to find it very difficult to manage that agency. Past history has taught us that a president who was absolutely inimical, almost, he just didn't think that CIA was of any use. When he started President, I'm talking about President Nixon.
Right.
When he started the work, he found it's extremely difficult to work with them. So this is the initial difficulty President Trump will have in managing the CIA.
All right, sir, do stay with me. Mr. Carl, let me come to you now. You can talk from first-hand experience here. How important are the inputs of an agency like the CIA for the president of the most powerful nation in the world?
Well, most people are unaware to what extent the role of intelligence by all countries, the intelligence agencies, is pervasive. It's not universal and all deciding, but it is far more present. Intelligence operations are far more present in what we think we know and what happens and the decisions taken by governments than the public could ever realize. So it is critical. I'm not saying this is good or bad. It's just how the world functions. It is critical to have a successful relationship, if possible, between the executive, who is in charge, and the intelligence services that serve. It's shocking, actually, when one is on the inside and discovers the pervasiveness of the role of intelligence in foreign affairs.
Also then, Mr. Carl, do you think Donald Trump, as the president, he'll be choosy to believe what suits him and reject what doesn't, perhaps?
Well, yes. There is always tension, and it's largely by design and a good thing, between the executive, meaning the president, and the intelligence service, usually through the head of the CIA. We are supposed to stand outside of the policymaking structure. Legally, we have no role in policy, and try to speak truth to power is the expression. Now, the problem with the nomination of someone like Mr. Pompeo is that as the president's man, as someone from the political party, he's already intentionally on the other side of the policymaking process. This skews the function and the intent of the intelligence community and does raise questions. When you get to President Trump's character, the first thing an intelligence officer has to do always, and everyone should do, is look at the source.
Right.
Of the information, and information is largely only useful to him if it praises him. So this creates a lot of problems.
All right, and what about you, Mr. Balachandran? How do you see this relationship evolving going forward as far as Donald Trump and the CIA is concerned?
There is a big danger from the past history that is what is called sexing up with intelligence. This was there even in President Reagan's time, when he wanted, through his director CIA, Bill Casey, wanted a certain assessment to be made on Soviet Union, and the CIA did not cooperate. And now the same thing happened during the Second Gulf War. It was popularly known as sexing of intelligence. The intelligence to be tailor-made for the predetermined intention of the leadership. Now, that is the biggest danger that the CIA will be facing. CIA will resist that. And then ultimately, what the intelligence that is given to the policymakers will not be adequate for proper policy. I think that with the mental makeup of President Trump and his CIA nominee, this is the biggest danger that will be facing the Americans.
All right. Gentlemen, do stay with me. I'm going to come back and we'll continue to discuss more on this. In fact, the new man at the CIA. Let's take a closer look at him as Michael Richard Pompeo takes charge as the director of the CIA. Here's a look at the man and his stance on various issues till now. Take a look.
I'm Michael Richard Pompeo.
Republican Congressman from Kansas, Michael Pompeo, who was confirmed as the CIA director in the Trump administration, served in the Army and is a Harvard School graduate. He wants Edward Snowden, former NSA contractor who leaked secret information, to be given death sentence and, like his President Trump, wants to scrap the Iranian nuclear deal. He is in favor of mass surveillance program and supports surveillance programs of Americans and foreign leaders. During his confirmation hearings, Pompeo said he was against harsh interrogation techniques like waterboarding, but later said he would support a review of the ban on waterboarding.
And I know they will be.
He is opposed to abortion and has strong views on Muslim leadership. He says if the Muslim leadership does not condemn attacks by Muslim radicals, then they are, quote, complicit in the attacks, unquote. And the big stand, unlike his President Donald Trump, he sees Russia as a threat.
Russia has reasserted itself aggressively, invading and occupying Ukraine, threatening Europe, and doing nothing to aid in the destruction and defeat of ISIS.
What the Pompeo era means to the CIA remains to be seen.
Come to you. We played out a short report showing his stance till now on various issues. Now, both Donald Trump and Pompeo, they sound similar in their approach to an extent. Would they then be more complementing each other? Mr. Carl, that question was for you. Giles, I'm going to come back to you in just a bit.
Yes, pardon me. I didn't know it was for me. Well, Pompeo comes from the right wing, to a large extent, of the Republican Party. Now, one can agree or disagree with the views, but they are on the whole coherent, and he is an intelligent practitioner. He's also a highly partisan politician who puts principle aside for partisan advantage in the attacks against Hillary Clinton and so on. But we can expect a coherent right-wing, hard right-wing on foreign policy from Pompeo. Trump is all over the place and is a nationalist and a populist. There will be areas of overlap. I think if Pompeo succeeds in praising the chief, then he might win the president's ear. If he takes a stance that seems to clash, then Trump will say no.
All right. Mr. Balachandran, now his stance on torture and waterboarding in particular have been very ambiguous. He initially said he's not in favor of it, later said he might consider it. What do you think about this ambivalence on his part?
Ambivalence is very, very dangerous for a leader. I think he has to make up his mind. Is he going in for waterboarding? Is he going to do the objectionable way of interrogating, which has been condemned, which has been judicially condemned in the United States and elsewhere in the world? You cannot have an ambivalent leader.
Right. And Mr. Carl, you know, this question is to you. At his confirmation hearing, Pompeo also said that he wanted to track information from social media accounts. How do you think that the public is going to respond to something like this?
Well, the public overall takes a position that is somewhat contradictory. The general view is, well, if you don't do anything wrong, you have nothing to fear, which means that people are willing to go along with the loss of their freedoms. At the same time, they oppose government intrusion. Now, that is not a coherent position, but one shouldn't expect that on a subtle point of law and policy from the general public. But I'm afraid that he will probably, or the administration will probably, succeed in expanding the surveillance capabilities if they want to. Now, it's one last point. It is routine, normal, and not particularly alarming, really, that intelligence services survey open source material, such as a Facebook page that I might have or you. Clandestine penetrations of private things are different, and that's probably what we're talking about.
Right. You know, Giles, give us a sense as to, you know, on what I just asked Mr. Carl right now, that he wanted to track information on social media. And once again, if we go back and talk about Trump's decision to travel to Langley so quickly after taking, you know, assuming office, how's that being seen there?
Well, as I was saying before, Sana, the Trump administration are clearly trying to make overtures towards the CIA and the U.S. intelligence community, certainly publicly, to try and sort of get rid of this concept of a split. And then in terms of Mike Pompeo, really only time will tell in terms of what his positions are on surveillance. He's co-authored an op-ed talking about reinstating bulk collection of telephone metadata. And then during his written answers to the Senate confirmation hearing, he said, and I quote, I'll consult with experts on whether the Army Field Manual uniform application is an impediment to gathering vital intelligence to protect the country. So really what he's done is left the door open on two key issues, really, on the use of what some people would call torture and on extending the US surveillance capabilities. So we'll really have to see what he's actually going to do specifically as he takes over as director of the CIA.
Absolutely. Giles, thanks so much for joining us here this evening and sharing your thoughts with us on the show. I'd request Mr. Balachandran and Mr. Kal to please stay on with me. Let's talk now a bit about, the CIA, the organization, its legacy. The organization, Mike Pompeo, in fact, is going to head is perhaps the most powerful spy agency in the world, the CIA. That's what we're talking about. It is credited with having impacted world history through its various successes and also spectacular failures. Take a look at when the CIA got it all wrong. Perhaps the world's most powerful spy agency, the CIA's successes have shaped the world in ways we may not even know, but its failures have also been spectacular. The agency not only failed to prevent the biggest terror attack on US soil, but the detailed 9/11 Commission report too laid the blame on intelligence failure. In the case of US attack on Iraq as well, security experts believe a series of events led to the rise of the Islamic State. Mr. Balachandran, first to you. The CIA has also, been flawed with their inputs before, like the lack of intelligence about 9/11, no weapons of mass destructions in Iraq, even the more recent Khalid al-Masri case or the Old Bay of Pigs fiasco of 1961. Your thoughts?
Well, there is I have a different take on this. It is not that CIA did not have the intelligence. As 9/11 Commission had said, it was an absence, a lack of imagination on the part of the leaders. I, as a professional intelligence officer, would not blame the CIA for this, because 9/11 Commission had said that the intelligence was there. How do you use it? How do you implement it? How do you practice it? That particular system was not there in the United States, just as we also did not have it in our country for a long time. So that is the reason why a number of intelligence reforms in USA, like Department of Homeland Security, Director of National Intelligence, to coordinate between 16 intelligence agencies, that was done. So the intelligence was there. Even during the Pearl Harbor, there was intelligence. But it was all tucked away in some corners of the government with no coordination. Right. So in a way, we have to progress.
Right. Mr. Glenn Carl would be able to give us a more, a perspective, because he was part of the CIA. What do you have to say about all these instances, where the CIA, they say, according to these detailed reports, wasn't able to gather enough intelligence inputs, and hence we saw these, attacks, specifically the 9/11?
Well, it's very refreshing to hear that my colleague speak just now. It's unusual to have someone who has that insight and those opinions, with which I agree entirely. To substantiate that, I will point out that in the 18 months prior to the attack of September 11, 2001, the CIA sent 47 separate warnings to the Federal Aviation Administration concerning the potential use by Islamic terrorists of aircraft. We don't make policy. We get many things wrong, but we did have information. That is true. Now, an intelligence service, the standard for it is perfection, 100% success, and we will always fail that way. The CIA does a good job of collecting information. It is a human institution and will make 100 mistakes a day. The consequences of covert action, which is trying to influence the policies and actions of a foreign state rather than just collect intelligence, that is a very delicate subject. There are always unintended consequences. And it's a policymaker's decision to weigh what they may be, or if the risk is worth the potential gain. But frequently the future turns out differently than one hopes.
All right, Mr. Carl, point taken. Also, another question to you is, the last president who was disparaging about the CIA was Nixon, but even he did not give a public dressing down to the CIA like we've seen Trump do.
Yes. Well, I don't know if Nixon was the last. The relations between President Clinton and the intelligence community were tense at first. He was quite wary of the national security establishment. And George Bush, son, had very difficult relations with the CIA because in almost every instance on the, quote, war on terror, the intelligence community disagreed in its assessments with the public positions taken by the administration. Not the policies, but the public positions. So we are accustomed, unfortunately, to always having tense relations with the executive. This is how it goes. Now, the unique aspect about President Trump is that, and this is not meant to disparage, but to observe, his positions really are almost meaningless, except seen as a way to encourage or oblige support and praise for him. That's the only policy, really, that he seems to have other than populism and nationalism. So from that perspective, if we say something that he has done has played poorly in India, say, he will then criticize the CIA.
All right. Mr. Balachandran, now let's talk a bit about Europe as well. Trump has been belligerent about Europe. What is the extent of cooperation that the intelligence agencies in Europe will give the CIA, according to you?
You see, intelligence has become an extremely complicated subject. Without the help of other allies, even earlier, even in the Second World War, or right throughout, and in the modern world, we don't have intelligence cooperation from United States, European allies. It'll be extremely difficult for America to tackle all the problems as a superpower. Now, if you, the basic underlying principle is, if your political relationship is not that cordial, the intelligence relations, like the diplomatic relations, also will suffer. Now, if you don't want the European allies, if you proclaim that they are not needed, they are not going to help you at all. So, US on their own will not be able to tackle the problem that is facing as a superpower. So, this is going to be another big difficulty which President Trump is going to face.
Mr. Kahl, would you agree on that?
I agree with that. Absolutely. I think a concrete example in the war on terror, for the last 20 years I've been, well, now decade, in public speaking about the issue of torture in the CIA in the United States. I know for a fact that many countries, intelligence services and foreign policy establishments, changed their cooperation with the United States, diminished it, withheld information and operational support because they knew that the CIA, the United States government, was engaging in torture, and they would not have anything to do with it. Similarly, I know, although I'm no longer in the government, that because of the concerns of the connections of the Russian intelligence service with the administration of President Trump, somehow foreign intelligence services are now more wary of sharing certain information for fear that it will get to the Russian intelligence service or the Iranians, if the issue is the Middle East. Already, this is having a dramatic, harmful effect on U.S. foreign policy and intelligence operational capabilities.
Right. And my last question and the closing comments I'd like from both of you. First to you, Mr. Glenn Kahl, taking on from what you said. So how crucial is it for Donald Trump, the U.S. president, to in time and convincingly clear suspicions about his dealings with Moscow, with the CIA and other intelligence agencies?
Well, I think I was thinking of this exact point as we were talking. This is the greatest question facing the United States since World War II in many ways. And I am not speaking with exaggerating my words. If there is any connection of Russian intelligence with the administration, it is an existential threat to the United States. We have already established that the Russian intelligence service acted in behalf, at least in behalf of the Trump campaign to see Hillary Clinton defeated and him elected. And this is now already forgotten. There's such an avalanche of other crises, issues, doubts, questions, and consistencies that it's already not talked about anymore. But it is a huge, huge question. So it has to be cleared up. It has to be cleared up, and I'm afraid it won't be unless it's cleared up in a terrifying way.
All right. And what about you, Mr. Balachandran? Two key issues being, it should be clarified that, it's crucial that it's clarified in time and also convincingly for things to move forward. Your thoughts?
Yes. If we go back to the 1980s, that was a time when there were strong indication that the British intelligence services were penetrated by the KGB. And at that time, American intelligence did not want to share any of their sensitive intelligence with the British intelligence. Now, we shouldn't have a situation in America where the political relationship with Moscow is so cordial that the intelligence that they churn out from America by CIA is looked upon with suspicion by the European allies. So I'm not advocating in a Cold War or anything like that, but we have to be prudent and look after the interests of USA, or for that matter, it applies to India also. So I think President Trump has to give a new level of leadership to managing the CIA and give them the confidence that their independent work will be appreciated.
Okay, gentlemen, on that note, I thank you so much, Mr. Balachandran, as well as Mr. Glenn Carl, for joining me on this discussion. What will Pompeo mean for the CIA? How effective will he be for Trump's agenda? That remains to be seen. On that note, we're taking a very short break here on Gravitas. When we return, news from Pakistan and more on the new Trump era. I'll be right back. Stay tuned.